Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. Each week, I'm sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with my many great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. For me, it starts with gratitude and personal accountability. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. If you would like to support the show, check out the Support Us page on the Derate the Hate website. With that, my friends, let's get to it. Friends, I am excited this week to bring you an inspiring story of transformation and hope with my guest, Quay Hanna. Quay's journey is one of those rare, raw tales that has the power to reshape perspectives. Back in the mid-90s, Quay was just another young man from rural Pennsylvania with preconceived notions and a limited view of the world. But that all changed when he embarked on a 9-week Greyhound bus journey across 37 states. What began as a simple cross-country trip turned into a life-altering experience chronicled in his memoir, Bus America, Revelation of a Redneck. In the years since, Quay has taken his lessons from the road and transformed them into over 1,300 presentations across multiple countries, speaking with honesty and heart about the importance of understanding, diversity, and confronting stereotypes. His ability to connect with people of all backgrounds and bridge divides has made him a sought-after speaker and a passionate advocate for youth empowerment and community building. Quay and I also share a common bond as fellow advisors for the Pro-Human Foundation, an organization committed to fostering unity and human dignity. Today, we'll dive into the profound insights he gained on his journey, discuss his work in education and youth empowerment, and explore how simple human connections can dismantle even the most entrenched prejudices. This is another fantastic DTH conversation that you do not want to miss. So here we go. Quay Hanna, thank you so much for joining me here on the Derate the Hate podcast. I'm very glad to see you today. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Wilk. It is a privilege and a pleasure to be here.
You know, when I started looking into the work that you've been doing for now, 20 some years, Quay, I got excited. Anybody who knows me knows that people that work with and try to better the world for our kids, that's one of my inspirations, trying to better the world for my kids, and somebody who's working with the youth of America, trying to make it all make sense for them, is somebody that I get excited about. And then knowing that you're also part of the board of advisors with the Pro-Human Foundation. So Quay, again, grateful to have you here today and to introduce you to the DTH listeners. So let's jump in. I want to tell people exactly what it is that started your journey and helped them along. So let's start back mid-90s. You finish up, you get out of high school, and then you've got some things that you're trying to figure out, and then you went on a little bit of a bus tour. So let's start there, Quay. What was the inspiration for what became a book ultimately, Bus America? What was the inspiration for that trip that was then the inspiration for the book?
Well, I actually was I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in English, so I was an English major in college and was a big reader and had read lots of books about traveling around America and around the world. And so in my mind, it was that I said, well, what's one way that somebody hasn't written about traveling around America, and I thought, well, what about Greyhound bus? I couldn't think of anybody who had done that. And I was reading Kerouac, and I was a Henry David Thoreau fan, even though he didn't travel, but like just this idea of simplicity and doing what you want and traveling, seeing America, seeing the world. So when I graduated college in 1992 with my Bachelor of Arts degree, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And it was about 6 months after graduation, January of 1993. I had promised that I was going to write a book and I was going to do something, and was feeling a lot of pressure because I wasn't pursuing a career in my field, with my major, and I was the first Hanna to go to college, and I was feeling a lot of pressure, and I had paid for college as I went, which is unique. I don't know too many 21st century people who were able to do it, but I had paid as I went.
Not very many.
I was debt free. It was January of 1993. I had $3,000 in the bank, and I said I call it a reverse midlife crisis. And what a reverse midlife crisis is, I was 23 years old, and I said, when I'm 46, what will I look back and say I should have done that when I was 23? And I said,
wow,
see America. And it played into the fact that I wanted to write a book too, about seeing America, or about traveling. And so I decided on January 19th, 1993 to get on a Greyhound bus and see my country. The underlying theme of the book, though, and of the whole thing, was that I had grown up. I'm from rural white America. I'm from a little town called Strasburg in the southern end of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I grew up with, over time, developing very racist and prejudiced views about the country and about, my fellow human beings that had darker skin. And okay. So, if you're a 23-year-old white country boy getting on the bus, even in Lancaster City, it was a pretty shocking experience from the start. And I explained it that it was, as far as I could remember, the first time that I was a minority getting on that bus. So it was the beginning of the adventure, learning things that I hadn't planned on learning, and having a change in my perspective that was not the intention of the trip, but certainly was the greatest thing I took from it.
That's awesome, man. And I got to tell you, Quay, that the idea that you at 23 years old had this idea of at 46, I want to look back and say, what is it that I want to be able to talk about? And I wish so many people had that kind of foresight, right? Because most 23-year-olds, me included, when I was 23, was more interested in, what am I going to do on Saturday night, and how am I, how am I going to have the most fun with the little amount of money that I've got in my pocket, mm-hmm. and the little bit of time that I've got on my hands. So that idea that you were there mentally is incredible. And then I also think about it, and I can relate to your situation there. You're in Lancaster City, and now you feel for the first time in your life like you're the minority. I mean, I joined the service when I was 20 years old. I'm from rural Midwest, America, a little town in Northwest Iowa, and grew up around little cities, or little towns in the Midwest myself. Very, very little in the way of people of color in my upbringing, but the one thing I guess where we differ in our stories, and this is what I want to start to unpack with you, Quay, is you say that you were never somebody who, and I, all in all candor, I was not one of these people who developed racist beliefs and stuff like that. I always thought people were just people. I've been accused of being a racist, but never considered myself a racist. But I do consider myself a redneck, and I call myself a Midwest redneck, which is kind of funny. And I don't think it's a prerequisite, just for all my redneck friends out there. I don't think it's a prerequisite to be a redneck that you got to be a racist. But you talk a lot in your talks, Quay, about how you had developed these racist beliefs and had people of color as friends, and you would act one way in front of them and another way behind behind closed doors or in different company. And I want to get into that because I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. It's something that's obviously played a big part in your story. So let's kind of go down that road a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you said about the prerequisites for being labeled as a redneck. That's a part of my discussion or my presentation when I'm speaking to teenagers is that we get labeled as things, and then there's stereotypes that go with the label, and we kind of are put in this dilemma of well, if I want to be an authentic whatever, then I have to have these characteristics. And so maybe we have some of the characteristics and then we get labeled as something. So in my case, I had some of these characteristics that I would get labeled as a redneck. But then the way I phrase it is like, I wanted to be the best redneck that I could be. And so I started doing other things that I wasn't really interested in because I wanted to be a good redneck. The one example I use is, I worked on this Christmas tree farm. I did that for 7 years. And where we're from, it's you have to kind of understand the location where we are. But like Bloomsburg, where I went to college, is up in the mountains, and so they call us Flatlanders, and they're ridge runners, because they live in the mountains. Well,
sure.
So even among rednecks, there's some that are more redneck than others, and so as a Flatlander, interacting and working with the locals and the townies on the Christmas tree farm, it was always a little bit in question. Is Quay really one of us? And so one of the things they used to do is they'd eat buckwheat cakes for breakfast. And buckwheat cakes are pancakes made out of sourdough. And I hated them, but I wanted to be authentic, so I would force down a stack of buckwheat cakes on the day, every day of Christmas tree season, just to make sure I have my that I'm authentic. So. And I don't think that's unique to Redneck America. I think I see it all the time. And, the students of color that I work with, there's this, you're not black enough, or, you may be Hispanic, but you're not from the island. So you're not truly Spanish. It's just, there's a lot of these things that we run into. And so we have to make decisions about if we're going to let that dictate, where we stand on these issues. I would say that I do think that within my culture and my subculture and where I grew up, that prejudice views were common, and I would say sometimes expected. I've gone back and I went to high school with 3 black students total. My high school was small. Now you're from Northern Iowa. I was curious if you're from Buffalo Center. Are you familiar with Buffalo Center at all?
I'm trying to remember where Buffalo Center is, but no, I'm literally, if you go almost as far west to the northwest corner of Iowa, yeah. So if you know where Sioux Falls and Sioux City and Worthington and those areas right there, that kind of section of northwest Iowa, southeast South Dakota, that's kind of the area that I grew up in.
Yeah. Well, and one of our pastors, who I'm also related to through marriage, he's from Buffalo Center, Iowa, and so I know when I talk about coming from a small school, he's like, "Oh, you want to hear about a small school?" Like, I know. But so I graduated.
Like 17 people in the graduating class,
exactly,
that kind of thing. Yep.
But my high school is about 500 students, and compared to a lot of schools, it's my kids' graduating class where they go to high school. So. And we were predominantly white. Like I said, about 3 black students, and one of them I reached back out to after I started doing this for a living, and to ask her about her experiences, because like I was friends with her, and of course I would sit with her in study hall and in the lunchroom, and like I wasn't embarrassed to be around her. Um, but and what's interesting is to hear it from her perspective when she says, there's things that she experienced that, of course, she didn't share with me about someone using a racial slur around her, or maybe that I made her uncomfortable, or she felt uncomfortable in certain contexts and situations, and she just dealt with it. For me, I would have said, "Well, of course she doesn't think I'm a racist," and I'm not. And I would have said I'm not, because these girls that I'm friends with, they're not who I'm talking about that I hate. Like I sometimes will say this in my assembly too. Heather and Diana were their names, and I would say, I'm not talking about Heather. Like somebody would call me out to say, "Oh, why are you saying these things about black people?" Well, I thought you were friends with Heather and Diana. I'm like, I am. And they'd say, well, how can you say this then about black people? I'm like, well, they don't count. That's not who I'm talking about. And so
right.
I think not just with race relations, but in all of our ways, we have these exceptions. So we'll validate our hatred, and then when you're given an example of someone who doesn't fit the stereotype, we say, well, that they don't count. And to be honest with you, like just everybody does it. So they'll if somebody says I hate rednecks, and they say, well, what about Quay? I'm like, well, he doesn't count. He's not a real redneck.
He doesn't count.
Yeah.
He's not that kind of redneck.
Yeah,
right?
He's not the kind of redneck I'm talking about. So we get hung up on these things and waste a lot of time on it. And what I wish I would have seen then was an opportunity to put all that aside and stop being a hypocrite. Stop looking like a fool, which is what I did. I looked like a fool, and just gotten more serious at that time. But to be honest with you, my prejudice increased in college because, of course, your interactions are growing, and you're meeting a wider range of Black and Hispanic people and Asian people. You're meeting a wider range, but the pressure to be a redneck was greater because I stood out more. Right, the school that my high school, I was like everybody else. Like we all looked the same, we all dressed the same, we all acted the same, we all drove crappy cars, and like it was just you suddenly stand out. You go off to college, and I literally wore a John Deere hat. I chewed tobacco. I was a heavy drinker. I drank Pabst Blue Ribbon. I used to say my saying was they don't put a blue ribbon on any old beer. And Schmitz and whatever was about, $5 a case is what I drank back in the day. And so,
right.
It was, but I'm enjoying the attention I get because I'm the redneck, and I played soccer in college. So I was like the team redneck, and these guys are from Philadelphia and suburban Philly and Pittsburgh and New Jersey, and they've just never seen somebody like me. So it's suddenly like, wow, we thought that this was just a stereotype or not, that, a character from a movie. And here you are in the living flesh, wearing a John Deere hat in all seriousness. And I liked the attention and was bent on saying, okay, well, then I'm going to be the best redneck that I can be.
Sure. And I got to tell you, Quay, I can't tell you how many times I've run in circles of friends where I was like that token redneck, right? Wranglers, belt buckle, cowboy boots, hat, the whole works, right?
Yeah.
And it never bothered me, it's kind of funny, when you're running around with a group of Asian guys and they're like, yeah, this is our buddy the redneck, or something like that, right? And it's kind of funny, but and looking back on it, and some people, and I'd like to get a little bit more of how your perspective started to change on that. But yeah, any of these things that promotes that stereotypical us versus them thing, while it may be funny to us and our friends or our small circle of friends, and there's no ill will in anything that's being said anywhere, but it's that sideways glance that others start to look at you with, and the suspicions that are actually perpetuated. And is that really one of us, or is he not one of us, or those kind of things. So it does, in a lot of ways, I think, perpetuate that us versus them thing, which us versus them, as you and I know, often leads to far more ugly things. I would say, what I really do like about the fact that certain guys like you and I that would just engage with anybody is the fact that, I often go back to, whether it be Daryl Davis, our friend Daryl Davis, talking about how ignorance leads to fear, and then that fear leads to hate and violence and things like that. Or my friend Monica Guzman from Braver Angels, she often says those who are underrepresented in our life will be overrepresented in our minds and our imaginations. But we start to make up scenarios. You talked about friends there in high school, and it's like, yeah, I'm talking about them, but not them. And it's the ones that we're not talking about that we often make up things about in our minds. And then, and I don't mean us necessarily, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We start to perpetuate the stereotypes that some of those people that maybe don't have the goodwill that we don't think that we have, we start to perpetuate those stereotypes in our brain and in our mind, and then that starts to grow, and then that growth starts to metastasize and just become a much uglier thing. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about how your transformation started, Quay, and then how that eventually led to what you're doing now, and that's leading some of these incredible assemblies in schools and helping the youth of America work through their own struggles with these us versus them things, or these racial divides.
So I get on the bus in Lancaster City, which is, Lancaster is a very diverse city, and like I said, I was the minority. I had expectations of. One of the things I talk about a lot too is what we like, sort of like what you're saying there, is that we build in our mind the other. My assumption was that black people hated me, right? So I'm in some ways validating my racist views by saying, well, they hate me. You're going to criticize me for hating them, but why don't you criticize them for hating me? Even though, I'm making that up, not saying that there is no black person who hates me, but I'm just saying, like, I get on this bus. Most people don't even care about me on this bus. So, that's probably stood out more to me, is that I'm just being ignored. I kept a 180-page journal on the trip. So, I love going back and reading page 1 on there, me getting on this bus and me writing about how I'm going to write a book about this. And I was a big, and still am a big, Joseph Conrad fan. He was a 19th century writer from Europe. I'm actually rereading his book Victory right now. It was written in 1915, and he did a lot of traveling that motivated me. But he always talked about the physiognomy of people, and physiognomy is when you try to determine what a person's character is like based on their facial features. So in the opening pages of this book, I'm saying I'm going to study the physiognomy of my writing partner. So I'm going through the people who are on the bus, and I'm writing down, like, this person, this is probably what they've experienced in life. This is probably what they think about this. Like, completely, I don't know. I'm not talking to any of them, but it's based on what I think, based on what I see in their facial features, and it's almost, I still love going back and reading that first page, and then, because after I did all that with the people, then I said, now, I haven't really talked to anybody yet, so I don't know. So even that doubt, though, gives me encouragement that, like, even at the time, I wasn't. Maybe I knew that there was something a little bit wrong about all this, but it doesn't take long where I have to make a couple bus transfers, and I end up in Washington D.C., where I'm transferring to get on a bus to Richmond, Virginia. That ultimately I'm going to Atlanta, Georgia, and. I sat by myself in the first 2 transfers, but I get to DC and the bus is full. I'm the last guy who gets on the bus, and there's only one seat left, and it's next to this little old black guy. And, you know, the way I describe it is I was hoping that it would be what happens in dreams. You know, it's going to be this beautiful woman. It's going to be someone famous or somebody who's doing a documentary about people riding the bus. And I'm so intriguing. They make the whole thing about me. Like that's just the mindset I had for such a, you know, so self-focused and narcissistic. But here it's a little old black guy. And I'm saying, this is, you know, not what I wanted. And the driver does these announcements. And at the end of his announcements, he says, now say hello to the new friend sitting next to you. And one of the things I have to explain to teenagers when I'm speaking in an assembly, now this is pre-internet, pre-cell phone, you know, no social media. You're not everybody's not on their phones. You're just sitting there.
Yep.
And he says, say hello to the new friend sitting next to you. So I'm like looking out of the corner of my eye because I'm like, well, he probably doesn't want to be my friend. He's black, I'm white, you know, he's old, I'm young. But he's looking at me. And so I just kind of looked over at him and he goes, how you doing, friend? I said, I'm fine. How are you doing? He said, good. And we just started to talk. And
nice.
You've got 4 hours together, 5 hours. I forget what it is to Richmond from DC on a Greyhound. But and you know, the great thing about a bus ride is that you just have all this time in the world to talk. And you can't get away. You can't hide. It's just you. You don't have your friends around you. You don't have this. You don't have your history or your past, or you're just the guy. You're just a bus rider, and I'm sitting next to another bus rider, and we're just having a conversation. And you know, one of the things that stood out to me was how much we had in common, and I think that's sometimes what we miss. You know, when we lump each other together in these big groups, we just assume everybody thinks the same or are all on the same page. And that's why then if we have an issue with one person, we're like, well, yeah, but they're just representative of the whole group. But when I'm talking with this guy and I realize that we're similar politically in some ways, we're similar in our view of society and what would be better for society. And I just remember being shocked. Man, we're in agreement on so many of these things. And at some point, whether it was during the conversation or after, you know, I just remember thinking, I hope I don't say something racist, or I hope he doesn't find that out about me. And that doubt started me thinking, like, why am I embarrassed by that? You know, I'm always saying, oh, I'm proud to be white, or I'm proud of the stance I take on this. But yet I would be embarrassed because I like this guy and I wouldn't want to hurt him if he's like, wow, I thought this is what you were and this is actually what you were. That gets these wheels turning about. So where do you stand on this, Quay? Like, what do you really believe? Like, do you really hate this guy because of his skin color? And conversely, is that what I want him to think about me? Do I want him to assume he knows what I'm like based on my skin color or how I'm dressed or where I'm from? Well, of course not. I'd want him to converse with me and find out. Not saying everybody's going to like me, and I'm not saying I'm going to like everybody, but you give people an opportunity to show their character and who they are. And that was the beginning. And really it was as I traveled, I don't know how many people who are listening who've ever traveled by Greyhound bus, but it's not exactly a pleasant experience.
Not really.
I spent 9 weeks going through 37 states and 12,000 miles.
Wow.
So I was on a lot of buses. I was in a lot of bus stations. I'm a dumb country kid seeing America, and people are helping me. And one of the things I point out is that when I would be in a bus station, it would usually be the white people who would come up and try and rip me off, you know, try to convince me to give them money. They'd tell me a story, I'd fall for it, you know. And I thought that was one of the ways I say it is I think they were using my prejudice against me, where they assumed, oh, this country kid probably doesn't trust black people, so he'll be more gullible, he'll be more naive. Thinking that we're all unified because of our skin color, and it was usually the black and brown people who are like much more savvy to what's happening in the bus station. They're like, listen, dude, don't talk to that guy. don't go over there. I mean, I was in Jacksonville, Florida, and got to know these Hispanic guys that were on the bus with me, and we got to Jacksonville, and to be honest, I don't even know what was going on. They said, do not go in the bathroom right now. And I'm like, why? They're like, you don't need to know why, just stay here. Because people would target me. And
Sure.
I've traveled around the world now. I've been to all 50 states, 27 countries, and 5 continents. And I've had a lot of people who have done that for me. They've protected me. They've stood up for me. When I may not even have known what was going on because I don't speak the language. So
right.
There was a drastic shift in my perspective as I traveled around America when I realized that I couldn't trust my skin color prejudice to determine who was trustworthy in the bus station. Yeah, it was actually working against what I thought I knew. And by the end of the trip, I'm like, I can't go back. I can't.
Yeah. And I love, I love so much about this story, Quay, because, so early on in your trip, in your journey, in your exposure to a world that you didn't really know anything about, you started, one of the first things that stands out to me is the idea that you figured out very quickly that monolithic thinking is not a reality when it comes to anybody because of their immutable characteristics, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one huge mistake that so many people make is that, well, just because this person is this. I don't care if it's just because this guy is wearing Wranglers and a flannel shirt and boots, he's going to think and say and do this type of thing, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you and I still dress like that.
Right.
But I can guarantee you that we are much different people today than we were back in the 90s. But to mistake us for the way we dress or the color of our skin or whatever would be a huge mistake, right? Because that's not who we are. And when people start to gain the wisdom that no characteristic like that means you fall within some monolithic category, and we can automatically assume this. Talking about that word that I'd never heard before about trying to figure out, and I couldn't say it again because I didn't write it down.
Physiognomy.
Yeah, physiognomy. There we go. I've always considered myself a people watcher, Quay. I love, I make the joke. I've said it on this podcast and several other interviews and talks that I've done. I spent more time in my life on bar stools than I ever did in classrooms, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest things that I have enjoyed throughout my life and throughout the journey of my life is watching people and trying to figure out who they were. Some of them I've talked to, some of them I didn't talk to, but the whole part about that was trying to really understand how people work and who people are. And like I said, when you look at somebody and try to figure out who they are without actually having that conversation, so very often we are wrong. Doesn't mean it's not fun watching people, but mm-hmm. very, very often we come to conclusions that aren't really true. When I hear you telling your story, Quay, and how that journey, on a Greyhound bus across 37 states and 12,000 miles, and how your transformation started so early, mm-hmm. with one little old black guy saying, mm-hmm. hello, friend. Mm-hmm. I mean, it brings joy and hope to my heart, mm-hmm. because I know just through the work that I've done and the people that I've met doing this podcast and doing the work that I do with Braver Angels and the Pro Human Foundation, I know that starting that conversation is the beginning of so much wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much we can do. Okay, I know we're actually beyond our time, and I do want to get real quick. I mean, people are going to be able to go to this the show notes for this episode and find out more about Quay Hanna and the book that you've written. Talk for me real quick, Quay, before we wrap up our time here. Just tell me a little bit about how it came to be that you became part of the board of advisors for the Pro-Human Foundation. And just tell me one thing that you would like to, as a part of that board of advisors, what do you want people to kind of take away from your presence in that group?
Well, when I got started working in schools, because there was a racial incident at the school district that I live in right now, where my kids go to school, back in the fall of 1997, and they were kind of desperate because the race relations were extremely tense, and it involved a group of quote unquote rednecks, and I always say it took a redneck to speak to rednecks, and that was the first assembly that I did there, and started meeting with those guys, then started meeting with the black students who were involved in the incident, and eventually put the two groups together. It began to be known as Quay's Club, and we did that for 16 years, nice. Bringing together students who wouldn't normally talk to each other about these issues. And during that time, I was, I've done about 1,400 presentations. This is my 28th year. And one of the presentations I was giving was at Millersville University in the early 2000s. And Millersville is literally, the campus goes right up next to Penn Manor, which is the school district that I'm talking about. There was a professor at Millersville who's friends with Daryl Davis, and she said, "Oh, you got to come up and see this guy Quay speak." And Daryl lives in Maryland, only an hour or so from where I live, and so he came up to see me speak at this at Millersville University, and it was a small presentation, not like a huge crowd, but maybe 75 people. And there was only one black guy in the audience. It was Daryl Davis sitting in the front row. And those of you can go watch the videos of him on the Pro-Human Foundation. He's a big guy, and he was so stoic sitting in that front row. And I'm like, this guy hates this presentation. He hates what I have to say. I was kind of scared. And then afterwards, people were coming up to talk to me, kind of almost waiting in line to kind of come up and talk. And he was the last guy in the line. And I'm like, all right, here it comes. He's been waiting this whole time. And he's got these huge hands, and you go and shake his hands like, this guy's going to pummel me. But he's just like, hey, that was a great presentation. I'm glad my friend invited me up here. And then we became friends. And I said, would you ever come and speak at my club? And he's like, yeah, I'd love to do that. So I had him up to speak in my club at Penn Manor. And, funny story from that is, like, one of the things I do at the schools I go to is I sit in the lunchroom and then let people come over. We have organic conversations about things. It's just natural. It's, informal. So Daryl sat with me at lunch after he spoke to my club, and he had brought a Klan hood with him that he had shown to my club members. Well, somebody from the lunchroom came over and said, hey, I heard you have a Klan hood in that duffel bag. So he pulls it out, and he's holding it up. We're in the cafeteria, with 500 students in there. And so the one principal comes over to me, and he's like, hey, Quay, can you tell your buddy to quit holding up the Klan hoods in the lunchroom? We're going to cause a riot in here. So that was, Daryl and I, it was probably 20 years ago now. And so we became friends, and we actually co-presented at Penn State, Harrisburg one time. And he's been a big supporter of mine. And when he got connected to to Brian Bartning through FAIR, Daryl's told Brian, well, you got to talk to Quay. And so I had a chance to get in early with FAIR when that was getting started, and then when they started the Pro-Human Foundation, I felt honored that they wanted to continue including me, and I think what I bring to the table, to be honest, Daryl and I are similar in that we're I'm always amazed when I look at the board of advisors for FAIR or for Pro Human Foundation, because I stand out because I don't have I don't have the credentials, I don't have the letters behind my name, and that's valuable and it's important and it's good. I'm just pretty much a regular guy, and I think that's what works for Daryl too. Like when you meet him, you think he's going to be this guy that's done incredible things in his life. From not just his story about work, getting people to leave the Klan, but incredible musician.
Yep.
Just all of these things that he's done. So I haven't done what he's done, but I'm just a regular guy, and I love my job, and I think what I can add is just that I'm grateful that they include a regular guy, and what I can include or what I can add, I think, is that some of the real world experiences of students and teenagers in 21st century America. I do still work with a wide range of students. It's unbelievable, but it goes back to what you were saying. Like a guy says to me on the bus, "How you doing, friend?" And we think that these race relations and human relations are so complicated, and it's really very simple. And
it's very simple.
I'm 55 years old. I'm a 55-year-old white guy from Strasburg, Pennsylvania. There's nothing special about me. And when people say, "Oh, at some point you're going to lose that connection with the kids," I'm like, you're missing the point, because it's not about being cool. It's not about being relevant, or it's about sitting and listening to somebody and having a conversation. And people are craving it. And if you're willing to do that, anybody will talk to you. And so, I marvel at times at the students that I work with. I intentionally still dress in flannels and boots. Because part of it is I want them to also develop, I want it to break through their own stereotypes, so that the next time they see a flannel shirt and boots, they don't automatically think racist. They think, "Oh, maybe he's like Quay." So that's my goal. And I'm not as popular as I used to be, because I'm not a proponent of critical race theory. I refuse to call myself a racist just because my skin color is white.
That's right.
I don't know that I'd say I've been completely blackballed locally, but I don't get any speaking engagements. The last one I did, where I was brought controversy, and kids were, trust me, well, I should be careful, but people are crying because I traumatized them. In the meantime, I'm sitting in the lunchroom with all the black kids. They're all cool with me. They're fine. They're asking me. I'm like, come on. And anyway, well, it's a tough environment. And so as long as I get to keep doing what I'm doing, which is, working with these kids and helping them navigate life, it just doesn't really matter.
No, that's one of the most beautiful things about this work that we do. And I'll go back to the Pro Human Foundation and why it stood out to me so much, and I talked a little bit about it when we started this conversation, Quay, is this idea of going in and teaching the youth of America how to navigate these difficult subjects, right? And it isn't terribly difficult, finding that common humanity between us often starts with a conversation. As our friend Daryl Davis says, "How can you hate me when you don't even know me?" The reason that people hate each other is because they don't know each other, and they have preconceived notions of who those people are. One of the most beautiful things about the Pro Human Foundation is how they're using this as a curriculum-based and as an educational resource for helping the youth of America. Quay, this conversation could go on for a long time. I look forward to many more conversations in the future. You and I have obviously we've got a lot in common, both in our past and the work that we do, bridging divides, helping to bring people together, helping to spur conversations that can at times be contentious, but it doesn't have to be done in a contentious way. So much beauty in this conversation. Quay Hanna, thank you so much for joining me on the D-Rate the 8 podcast. I look forward to so much more.
Will, could I just throw one quick promo out for my new nonprofit?
You absolutely can.
Okay. One of the observations I've had over the last 10 to 12 years is that so many young people aren't getting their driver's licenses here in PA or here in Lancaster. In many of those circumstances, it's because they can't. They come from single parent households. There's only one car. Mom gets home from work at 11 o'clock at night. I have lots of students whose parents have died from heroin addiction, people whose parents are in prison. So I started a nonprofit ministry called Middle Relief Ministries that our goal is to help young people get their driver's licenses from disadvantaged backgrounds. And so we are just getting started. Hopefully January we'll have our first teens that I'll be taking out for driving lessons. But we're looking to raise funds to buy a car and get the insurance and get these teens out on the road. And get them on their way to freedom through traveling. And you know how where we're from is just it's very rural, so it's not having your license is it holds you back from living life, but also tempts you with other things because you just don't go anywhere and you sit at home and you don't get a job and you play video games and you smoke weed and so this is a way to give them some hope, to get them over a hump. And ultimately, we're hoping to be able to help give them scholarships towards their first car, connect them with local businesses to get jobs, and to break cycles of poverty and addiction.
That's such a beautiful thing, Quay. God bless you for the work you're doing. And there's so many things that the youth are struggling with today, and this is definitely an avenue that that's going to help a lot of people, and I appreciate you for it. Quay Hanna, thank you for joining me on the Derate the Hate podcast. All that information from your website, quayhanna.com, and information about your book, all that will be in the show notes for this episode, and I'm grateful for you, man. Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks, Will. It was a pleasure being on the show. I appreciate you, too.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.